Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into the future of surgery.
The future of surgery.
Specifically, soft surgical robots. Our listeners are super interested in this topic, and actually, they provided us with a dense research review article from Advanced Intelligence Systems to get us started.
Sounds intense.
Yeah, don't worry, we'll break down all the coolest, most interesting stuff for you. So the article focuses on how these robots can make minimally invasive surgery even less invasive. You know, the kind where they operate through tiny incisions.
Yeah. Minimally invasive surgery already means less trauma for patients, right?
Yeah.
Quicker recovery times and hopefully fewer complications.
Exactly.
But soft robots, oh man, they have the potential to take all those benefits even further.
Okay, so let's get into it. We already have robots assisting in surgeries.
Right.
What makes soft robots so special?
Well, think about traditional surgical tools.
Okay.
They're mostly rigid,
Uh-huh.
like tiny metal rods.
Oh, yeah.
Now imagine trying to maneuver those tools through like the delicate winding pathways of your lungs or intestines.
Oh, yeah.
Not ideal.
No.
Soft robots, though, incredibly flexible
Okay.
and compliant. That means they can actually conform to the body's natural curves and spaces.
Makes sense. So it's all about reaching those hard-to-reach places.
Yes.
Without causing damage, right?
Exactly.
But before we get into how these robots actually work, can you give us a super quick history of minimally invasive surgery? I know laparoscopic surgery was a big step in the 80s.
Absolutely. Laparoscopy was huge.
Yeah.
Really revolutionized surgery. It was pioneered by a gynecologist named Kurt Sem.
Oh, wow.
And the research article actually breaks down minimally invasive surgery into 4 main types.
Mm-hmm.
Extraluminal, intraluminal, transluminal, which is also called NOTES, and then hybrid.
Okay, so most people think of minimally invasive, they're thinking extraluminal.
Right.
It's operating through small incisions.
Exactly.
Like laparoscopy and thoracoscopy.
Yes, common examples.
Okay. Intraluminal procedures involve going through like natural openings.
Right.
Like the esophagus or the colon to reach the target organ.
Like with a colonoscopy.
Yeah. Okay, so far so good. What about transluminal and hybrid? Those sound more complex.
So transluminal takes things a step further. Surgeons actually go through the wall of a hollow organ to reach another space.
Whoa.
And then hybrid procedures, they kind of combine elements of the other 3 approaches.
Oh, okay. So where do soft robots fit into all of this? Are they being used for all 4 types?
They definitely have the potential to be used in all 4.
Okay.
But the research paper really zeroes in on the future of minimally invasive surgery.
Yeah.
And it really emphasizes the need for robots specifically designed to operate inside hollow organs.
Oh, okay.
Because these are really challenging environments. They're narrow, they're dynamic, often poorly visible,
Yeah.
and they're often where tumors develop. Surgeons need robots that can really navigate these spaces effectively.
I can only imagine how difficult it must be to operate in those tight spaces.
Yeah.
So what are some of the design challenges? Like what are engineers facing when they're building robots for these types of procedures?
Well, think about the gastrointestinal or the pulmonary systems.
Okay.
A robot would need to be incredibly long, like 1.5 to 2 meters long, to reach certain areas.
Oh, wow.
But then it also needs to be super slim to actually navigate those tiny winding pathways in these organs.
Yeah.
And of course, it needs to provide good force feedback so the surgeon can actually feel what they're doing.
That's a lot to ask for.
It is.
Okay. I can already see why this is cutting edge stuff.
Yeah.
So how are they making these robots move? What's going on in the world of soft robot locomotion?
There are a few different actuation principles, let's call them.
Okay.
And each has its strengths and its weaknesses. One common approach is what we call cable-driven actuation. So cables actually pull on parts of the robot to make it move.
Oh, I get it. So like pulling strings on a puppet. Yeah.
Exactly.
Got
Kind of like that. But using cables with soft, flexible materials, it's not like moving a rigid robotic arm.
Right.
It can be a challenge to control the precise movements.
Makes sense.
The article mentions a cardiac ablation robot that uses cable actuation, and controlling it in that kind of a delicate environment, that's really complex.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what other ways are they making these robots move?
Another common one is fluidic actuation. So that's using air or liquid pressure to create movement.
Oh, like that tentacle-like robot they describe in the article, the one that can diagnose conditions and deliver liquids.
Yeah.
That was a really cool example. But fluidic actuation probably has limitations too, right?
It does. It does.
Okay.
Each method has trade-offs.
Yeah.
When it comes to things like force, how controllable it is, size, and speed. So fluidic actuation, it's good for creating a variety of motions like bending, expanding, and twisting.
Okay.
and it's relatively low cost. But it may not be suitable for every application.
Makes sense. What about variable stiffness? That
Yeah.
was something I found super fascinating in the article. These robots can actually change how hard or soft they are?
Yeah. It's amazing.
Rubber band.
It's crucial for both navigation and manipulation.
Okay.
Imagine a robot that needs to, move through a blood vessel.
Okay.
It needs to be flexible enough to navigate those narrow pathways.
Yeah.
But then it needs to become stiff enough to, hold a suture needle steady or to manipulate tissue with precision. So variable stiffness really gives the surgeons that kind of control.
Wow, that's incredible. How do they change the stiffness?
Yeah.
The article mentioned something called jamming, and I have to admit, that one really caught my attention.
Jamming is super fascinating.
Yeah.
It involves using particles, layers, or wires that, when you apply pressure, they lock together. And that creates a sudden increase in stiffness.
So is that granular jamming where they use particles to change how solid the robot becomes?
Exactly. And it's particularly promising because it offers a good range of stiffness.
Okay.
And it can be integrated into different robot designs.
So like a robot filled with tiny granules. You apply pressure, the granules jam together, it makes it stiff, and then you release the pressure and the granules flow freely and it becomes flexible again.
Exactly.
Okay, that is so cool. It seems like magic, but it's real science.
It is.
Are there other ways to change the stiffness?
Definitely.
Okay.
They can use materials that change their properties in response to, say, electric or magnetic fields.
Oh.
Some shape memory materials can also become stiffer under certain conditions. So, for example, a robot could have wires made of a shape memory alloy.
Okay.
When they're heated, these wires contract and make the robot stiffer. When they cool down, the wires relax and make the robot more flexible.
Wow. So many clever ways to achieve the same goal. It's mind-blowing how much ingenuity goes into designing these robots. But I have to ask, how do they actually build these things? It sounds incredibly complex.
It definitely is. The article talks about the challenges of manufacturing these robots on an industrial scale. One common approach is molding and soft lithography. They're great for creating intricate shapes with incredible precision, down to the micrometer scale.
Micrometers? That's tiny.
It is.
If these methods are so precise, why aren't they the go-to for building all soft robots?
Well, they have some limitations. It's kind of like using a cookie cutter. You can make lots of identical cookies,
yeah.
but you need a new cutter for each shape, right?
Right.
So molding and soft lithography are great for mass-producing identical components.
Okay.
But they're not as adaptable when you need to make design changes or create customized robots.
Ah, okay. What about 3D printing? It seems like that's everywhere these days.
Yeah.
And it can create custom designs pretty easily.
3D printing holds a lot of promise for soft robotics.
Okay.
It offers a lot more flexibility in terms of design and customization.
Yeah.
One type of 3D printing that's particularly well suited for soft robots is called direct ink writing.
Direct ink writing.
Or DIW.
Okay.
It's kind of like using a very precise piping bag to deposit material layer by layer.
Oh, okay. So with DIW, you could theoretically print a soft robot in almost any shape imaginable.
Pretty much. And here's the really cool part.
Okay.
DIW lets you combine different materials within the same robot. You could have a soft, flexible body with a stiff, precise gripper, all printed in one go.
Oh, wow. So instead of molding individual parts and then assembling them, you can just print the entire robot with all its different parts and materials all at once.
Exactly.
That's incredible. It really feels like we're on the verge of a whole new era of surgery.
It is.
But I have a feeling there's more to these robots than just their physical design, right? I mean, they have to be smart in some way to actually navigate the body.
You're absolutely right. Building the physical robot is only part of the challenge. We also need to equip them with the ability to sense their surroundings and respond accordingly.
Okay.
And that's where sensors come in.
Okay, so we've got these amazing robots that can move and change shape, but how do they see where they're going inside the body? What kind of information are the sensors gathering?
Sensors provide crucial information to both the robot and the surgeon. They can be broadly categorized into three types: proprioceptive, environmental perception, and interactive perception.
Proprioceptive. That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. What is that?
So think of proprioception as like your body's awareness of its own position in space.
Okay.
Even with your eyes closed, you know where your limbs are, right?
Right.
So proprioceptive sensors give robots that same awareness.
Yeah.
They tell the robot its own shape and position within the body.
Okay, that makes sense. What about environmental perception? Are those like the robot's eyes?
You can think of it that way.
Okay.
Environmental perception sensors give the robot information about its surroundings.
Okay.
For example, EM sensors, which are like tiny metal detectors.
Mm-hmm.
They can be used to guide endoscopic tools. Optical fibers can be used to detect fluorescence, which can help with imaging and diagnosis.
Wow, so these robots can actually see inside the body in different ways.
In a way, yes. They're gathering information about the tissues and structures they're interacting with.
That's incredible. And then there's interactive perception,
Yes.
which is all about feel.
Yes.
So these sensors let the robot feel the tissues? I'm struggling to picture how that works.
Think about trying to tie a knot without being able to feel the tension. It would be impossible.
Right.
Interactive perception sensors let the robot detect forces and pressures,
Okay.
giving surgeons vital feedback during procedures.
Okay.
They're essential for delicate maneuvers, making sure the robot doesn't apply too much force and damage those delicate tissues.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. It seems like integrating all these sensors into a tiny, flexible robot would be a huge challenge.
It definitely is.
Hmm.
The article highlights the difficulties of multiplexing sensor information,
Okay.
basically combining data from different sensors,
Mm-hmm.
and making sure they work seamlessly with the robot's other components.
Right.
It's all about creating a system that can make sense of the world around it
Yeah.
and respond in a safe and effective way.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. I've got to ask the big question now. How do surgeons actually use these robots? Are we talking like futuristic control panels with joysticks and holographic displays?
Not quite that dramatic,
Okay.
but the goal is to create systems that feel intuitive and responsive,
Okay.
almost like an extension of the surgeon's own hand.
I can imagine that's a tough balance to strike, giving surgeons enough control to feel confident,
Yes,
but also leveraging the robot's unique capabilities.
exactly. The article talks about developing advanced control strategies that account for the unique properties of those soft materials.
Okay.
Remember, these robots aren't moving in like simple, predictable ways. They're bending, twisting, and deforming in ways that traditional robots can't even comprehend.
So instead of giving the robot specific commands like move left or rotate 10 degrees, you're guiding its movements more organically.
That's a great way to put it. It's more about shaping the robot's behavior
Right.
than giving it rigid instructions. And this is where machine learning and artificial intelligence really come into play.
Okay, tell me more about that. How does AI help with controlling these robots?
So researchers are using AI to create systems that can actually learn
Oh, wow.
from vast amounts of data, including videos of expert surgeons performing procedures.
Oh.
By analyzing this data, the AI can learn to anticipate a surgeon's intentions
Oh, wow.
and then adjust the robot's behavior accordingly.
So the robot is essentially learning to be a surgical assistant. It's almost like having another pair of highly skilled hands in the operating room.
That's the idea. It's about creating that seamless partnership, combining the surgeon's expertise and judgment with the robot's precision and dexterity.
Okay, so we've talked about design, materials, and control, but there's one crucial aspect we haven't addressed yet: safety. We're talking about robots operating inside the human body.
Yes,
That brings up a whole host of concerns.
of course.
How do we make sure these things are safe and reliable? That seems like a pretty big deal.
It is a huge deal. You've hit on a critical point. Safety is the top priority, and the researchers are taking it very, very seriously. The article really emphasizes the need for rigorous testing and validation long before these robots ever get anywhere near a patient.
So what kind of testing are we talking about? Are there like crash test dummies for robots?
Not quite crash test dummies,
Yeah.
but there are sophisticated simulations and benchtop experiments
Okay.
designed to push these robots to their limits
Yeah.
and evaluate their performance under various conditions.
So, for example, they might create a simulated environment that mimics the inside of the human body
Right.
and have the robot navigate through it.
Exactly. And they'll test the robot's ability to handle unexpected situations,
Okay.
like encountering an obstacle or experiencing a change in pressure. They also test the durability and biocompatibility of the materials, making sure they won't break down or cause any harm inside the body.
That makes sense. It's all about making sure these robots are robust and reliable, even in the unpredictable environment of the human body.
Precisely. And as these technologies move closer to clinical trials, the safety testing becomes even more rigorous,
Okay.
involving multiple layers of review and oversight.
Speaking of clinical trials, are any of these soft surgical robots actually being tested in humans yet? I'm curious how far along we are in terms of real-world applications.
There are a handful of very early stage trials underway,
Okay.
but we're still in the very early stages. The article cautions against getting too caught up in the hype,
Right.
and it really stresses the need for a very careful, measured approach.
That's a good point.
Mhm.
As exciting as all of this is, it's important to remember that patient safety always comes first.
Absolutely.
Rushing things could do more harm than good.
Definitely. And as this technology continues to develop, it'll be essential to have open and honest conversations about the ethical implications as well.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second. What are some of the ethical considerations surrounding soft surgical robots?
Well, one concern is the potential impact on the role of surgeons.
Okay,
Some people worry that robots might eventually replace surgeons altogether.
that's a valid concern. I mean, these robots are incredibly advanced, but can they truly replace a human surgeon's expertise and judgment?
It's a complex question,
Yeah,
and there are no easy answers.
yeah.
Most experts agree that while robots can augment a surgeon's capabilities and make surgery safer and more efficient, they're unlikely to fully replace human surgeons anytime soon.
That's reassuring to hear. I can see how robots could be incredibly valuable tools,
Yes.
but I don't think anyone wants to see surgery become completely automated.
Right. Another ethical consideration is accessibility.
Okay,
We need to ensure that this advanced technology is available to everyone who needs it.
right. We don't want to create a two-tier healthcare system
Exactly.
where only the wealthy have access to the best treatments.
Absolutely. There are also questions about data privacy and security.
Oh, right.
These robots collect a lot of information about patients. It's crucial to make sure that data is handled responsibly and ethically.
Okay, so there are definitely some important things to consider as this technology continues to evolve, but it's encouraging to see that researchers are thinking about these ethical implications from the outset.
Absolutely. It's crucial to have these conversations early on to ensure that soft robots are developed and deployed in a way that benefits all of humanity.
Okay, before we get too deep into the ethical weeds, I wanted to circle back to something that really fascinated me in the article, the discussion of new materials for soft robots.
That's an area that's absolutely exploding with innovation. It's driving a lot of the progress we're seeing in soft robotics.
I was particularly intrigued by self-healing materials. The idea that a robot could repair itself if it's damaged is mind-blowing.
It is. Imagine a surgical robot that could, autonomously patch up a small tear or puncture. That would dramatically improve its reliability and longevity.
Right. No more aborted surgeries because of a tiny malfunction. What other cool materials are they working with?
Well, biodegradability is a big one. The article talks about robots that can dissolve harmlessly in the body after completing their task.
That's incredible. No need for a second surgery to remove the robot. It just vanishes.
Exactly. And researchers are also developing materials that can change color or shape in response to specific stimuli, like temperature or pH.
Oh, wow.
Imagine a robot that could release a drug or change its stiffness based on its environment inside the body.
Okay, that is seriously cool. It sounds like we've only just begun to explore the potential of these new materials.
It really does feel that way. The possibilities are practically limitless.
Speaking of possibilities, the article also mentions the potential for disposable soft robots. But how far off is that vision? Will we see these robots in everyday hospitals anytime soon?
That's the million-dollar question. It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
The field is advancing so rapidly, but there are still significant challenges to overcome in terms of cost, scalability, and regulation.
So it's a waiting game, but a game with incredible potential.
Exactly. The innovations we're seeing today are laying the foundation for a future where surgery is less invasive, more precise, and accessible to more people.
Well, that's an inspiring thought to end on. I can't wait to see what the future holds for this field.
Me neither. It's a truly exciting time to be following the development of soft surgical robots. It's a truly amazing field. And the pace of innovation, it's just astounding.
Okay, so we've covered some of the basics about these soft robots, like how they move, how they can change shape, what materials they're made of. But I'm still not quite clear on how surgeons actually control these things, especially since they're always changing shape. It's got to be so complex.
You're right, it's complex. And the article goes into a lot of depth on that, about this whole idea of human-robot interaction. And it's clearly a huge focus of research in this area. I mean, what good is a brilliant robot if a surgeon can't even control it?
Right. So how do they actually interface with these robots? Are we talking like voice commands or those haptic feedback suits or maybe even mind control?
Well, mind control might be a little ways off. But the goal is to create systems that really feel intuitive and responsive, almost like an extension of the surgeon's own hand.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a challenge. Giving the surgeon enough control to feel confident, but then also making sure you're using all of the robot's amazing capabilities.
You got it. And the article talks about developing these advanced control strategies that take into account, the unique nature of soft materials. Remember, these robots aren't moving in simple, predictable ways. They're bending, twisting, deforming in ways that traditional robots can't even do.
So instead of giving the robot very specific commands like move left or rotate 10 degrees, it's almost like you're shaping its movements more organically.
That's a great way to think about it. It's more about influencing the robot's behavior than giving it these really rigid commands. And that's where things like machine learning and AI come in.
Okay, yeah, tell me more about that. How does AI help with controlling these robots?
Researchers are using AI to create systems that can actually learn from tons of data,
Wow.
including things like videos of really experienced surgeons doing procedures.
Okay.
And by analyzing all that data, the AI can actually learn to anticipate a surgeon's intentions and then adjust how the robot's behaving accordingly.
So the robot's essentially learning how to be a surgical assistant. It's almost like having another pair of highly skilled hands in the operating room.
That's the idea. It's all about creating a seamless partnership, combining the surgeon's knowledge and judgment with the robot's precision and, those fine motor skills.
Okay, so we've talked about design, we've talked about materials, control, but there's one other really big thing we haven't addressed yet. Safety. I mean, these are robots operating inside the human body.
True.
That brings up a lot of worries. How do we know these things are safe and reliable? That seems like a huge deal.
It's a huge deal. You're absolutely right. Safety is the absolute top priority.
Yeah.
And the researchers are taking it very, very seriously. The article emphasizes doing a lot of testing and validation way before they ever go near a patient.
So what kind of testing are we talking about? Are there, crash test dummies for robots?
Not quite crash test dummies, but there are these sophisticated simulations and, benchtop experiments that are meant to really push these robots to their limits.
Okay.
And see how they perform under different conditions.
So, for example, they might build a simulated environment that's like the inside of a human body.
Right.
And have the robot try to move through it.
Exactly. They'll test its ability to handle unexpected things, like what happens if it runs into an obstacle, or if there's a sudden change in pressure. They'll also test how durable the materials are.
Right.
And if they're biocompatible, meaning they won't break down or cause any harm when they're inside the body.
That makes sense. So it's about making sure these robots can handle anything, even in the unpredictable environment of the human body.
Exactly. And as these technologies get closer to clinical trials, all the safety testing gets even more intense.
Okay.
There are a lot of layers of review and oversight.
Speaking of clinical trials, are any of these soft surgical robots actually being tested in humans yet? I'm curious how far along things are in terms of real-world applications.
There are a few very early trials happening, but it's still very early days. The article cautions against getting too caught up in all the hype.
Right.
It stresses that we need to be careful and take a measured approach.
That's a good reminder. As cool as all this is, it's important to remember that patient safety comes first. We don't want to rush things and end up doing more harm than good.
Exactly. And as this technology keeps developing, it's also going to be important to have really open and honest conversations about the ethical side of things, too.
Okay, let's talk about that. What are some of the ethical concerns around these soft surgical robots?
Well, one concern that comes up is the impact this could have on surgeons.
Yeah.
Some people are worried that robots might end up replacing surgeons altogether.
Yeah, I can see why that would be a concern. I mean, these robots are amazingly advanced, but can they really replace a human surgeon's experience and judgment?
It's a really complex issue.
Yeah.
And there are no easy answers. Most experts seem to think that robots will probably make surgeons better at what they do and help make surgery safer and more efficient, but they probably won't completely replace human surgeons anytime soon.
That's good to hear. I can see how robots could be incredibly useful tools.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody wants to see surgery become completely automated.
Right. Another ethical thing to think about is accessibility. We need to make sure that this technology is available to everyone who needs it.
Right. We don't want to end up with this two-tier healthcare system.
Exactly.
Where only rich people have access to the best treatment.
Absolutely. And then there are the questions about data privacy and security.
Oh, right.
These robots collect a lot of information about patients. It's really important to make sure that data is being used responsibly and ethically.
Okay, so there are definitely some important things to think about as this technology develops, but it's encouraging to see that researchers are taking those ethical questions seriously right from the start.
Definitely. It's so important to have these conversations early on to make sure that soft robots are developed and used in a way that's good for everybody.
Okay, before we get too deep into the ethical side of things, I want to go back to something I found really fascinating in the article. The new materials they're developing for these soft robots.
Oh, yeah. That's an area where there's just so much amazing research going on. It's driving a lot of the progress in soft robotics.
I was really interested in those self-healing materials, like the idea that a robot could actually repair itself if it gets damaged. That's just mind-blowing.
It is. Imagine a surgical robot that can, just patch itself up if it gets a little tear or a puncture. It would make them so much more reliable.
Right. No more having to stop surgery because of a tiny malfunction. What other kinds of cool materials are they working on?
Well, biodegradability is a big one. The article talks about robots that can actually just dissolve safely in the body after they've done their job.
That's amazing. So no more second surgery to take the robot out. It just disappears.
Exactly. And researchers are also working on materials that can change color or shape when something specific happens, like a change in temperature or pH.
Huh.
Imagine a robot that can release a drug or change how stiff it is just based on what's happening around it inside the body.
Okay, that's seriously cool. It sounds like we've only just scratched the surface of what's possible with these new materials.
It really does feel that way. The possibilities are pretty much endless.
Speaking of possibilities, the article also talks about the potential for disposable soft robots. But how far away is that, really? Are we going to start seeing these in hospitals anytime soon?
That's the big question. It's tough to say for sure. I mean, the field is moving so fast, but there are some pretty big challenges to overcome, like how much they cost, whether we can make enough of them, and what the regulations will be.
So it's a waiting game, but one with some incredible potential.
Exactly. All the amazing things happening now are setting the stage for a future where surgery is less invasive, more precise, and available to way more people.
Well, that's a pretty inspiring note to end on. I can't wait to see what happens in this field.
Me neither. It's a super exciting time to be following the development of soft robots and surgery.
It really does feel like things are changing so fast in surgery. It's amazing to think how far this field has come in such a short time.
It really is remarkable. And it's happening because of all these different fields coming together, materials science, robotics, AI, even biology. It really shows what can happen when you get people from different areas working together.
Speaking of working together, I'm curious about the role surgeons play in all this. Are they just the ones using these robots in the end, or are they actually helping design them?
That's a great question. The article really stresses how important it is to get surgeons involved right from the beginning. After all, they're the ones who know what patients need and what it's like to operate inside the human body.
It's like trying to design a car without ever talking to any drivers. You might end up with something that looks cool, but doesn't actually work on the road.
Exactly. So there's a big push to have engineers, surgeons, even patients all working together as a team. That way, the robots they're building are actually solving the right problem for the people who are going to use them.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not just about building something fancy. It's about finding solutions that really work and put the patient first.
Exactly. And this whole team approach has led to some really creative designs. One trend that's getting a lot of attention is building robots in modules, kind of like building blocks.
So like Legos, you can just snap different parts together to make a robot that's perfect for that specific procedure.
That's a great way to think about it. This lets surgeons customize things in so many ways. It's like they can build the exact robot they need for that patient and their body.
That's taking personalized medicine to a whole new level. Okay, as we wrap up our deep dive into soft surgical robots, what are the main takeaways you want our listeners to remember?
First, I want to emphasize just how much innovation is happening right now. There are huge advances in materials, design, how they're made, sensing, control. It's an amazing time to be following this field.
It really feels like we're seeing a whole new era of surgery being born, one that's going to have a major impact on healthcare in the coming years.
Absolutely. And it's important to keep in mind that even though there's so much potential, it's still early days for this technology. We still have challenges to overcome, but the progress is really inspiring.
Right. It's a marathon, not a sprint. But we seem to be heading in the right direction.
Definitely. One last thing I want to say is how important it is to work together and always focus on the patient. The best soft surgical robots, will be the ones that are developed hand in hand with the people who will actually be using them and benefiting from them.
Very well said. It sounds like the future of surgery is soft, and it's full of possibilities.
I couldn't agree more.
So to all our listeners out there, if you're excited about this field, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep dreaming big.
The future is out there, waiting for us to shape it.
And that's it for our deep dive into the world of soft surgical robots. Thanks for joining us.